Welcome to Media Empires, where we sit down with the most influential media creators right now to learn exactly how they built their empires. Our aim is to extract the secrets of top-tier podcasters, newsletter authors, and media creators who are breaking the old rules for media success. Whether you're looking to start your own empire or simply curious about the nuts and bolts behind media businesses, you'll find valuable insights and tactics in each episode. Grab your headphones, let's dive in.
This week on Media Empires, I'm joined by Jacob Donnelly, the founder of A Media Operator. In this conversation, he shares insights on sustainable media businesses, the significance of niche publications, and the importance of first-party data for successful advertising and subscription models.
Jacob, welcome to Media Empires. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, man.
For some of the audience who may not be familiar, although many will be, why don't you give a brief background into your background and how you came to start a Media Operator?
Yeah, so I launched a Media Operator 4.5 years ago, which is kind of crazy to think about that it's going on almost half a decade. And I launched it just as an opportunity to write about how I thought you should build media businesses. I'm not a natural networker. I'm an introvert. I was just in the city this morning and I'm now very tired from just like talking to people. And so I thought if I write about this sort of stuff, people who also believe in the same things will find me. And it worked. And then enough people told me I should start charging for it. And so I started to charge for it. And then people started saying that they wanted to advertise. So I started selling advertising. People told me they wanted to come to an event. So I did an event. About a year into launching it, I met the Morning Brew co-founders. And so for 3 years, I was the general manager and then publisher of their professional division. So we grew that business from, I think, 4 million the year before I started to 23 million in revenue, which great products, great audience, great writing, great everything, just all around great product. But after doing that for 3 years, I realized I should probably go all in on building my company. And so for the past, I don't know when this is going to come out, but for the past like 8 weeks, I've now been full-time on building AMO.
And tell, what's the vision for AMO? Like, what is the if you could wave a wand and all your dreams with it would come true, what would that look like?
Yeah, so media is kind of at an interesting inflection point right now. A lot of the bigger media companies are in, whether you call it like incremental decline or just like catastrophic decline, like they are dying. But I have never been more optimistic about media. It's just, I think that media is going to look a lot more like this. I think it's going to look a lot more like, niche publications. And so my vision for AMO is to be the resource for operators who are trying to build sustainable media companies. And that's an important word for me because media doesn't scale like venture-backed startups. Very, very few media companies will ever make it to $1 billion valuation. And so you have got to be sustainable pretty early on. Like you need to be making money pretty early on. And if you're not, you're going to have problems. So my vision is just provide the information and the resources they need to continue making better decisions about building their media companies.
And what do you think about the business model of your company in terms of ad scale, like which is going to be the most successful? Or how do you think the pie chart is going to work out?
So the easiest revenue for AMO right now is advertising. And it often is for media companies, just because if you have an audience, especially in business media, if you have an audience of decision makers, there's some sort of software company out there that wants to get in front of them. So that's going to always be the easiest. And, for AMO, I've already hit 50% of last year's revenue in the first 6 weeks, and 90% of that is ads. I've signed some great, renewals with my partners, brought on new partners. So like, the ads is a good business. If I look at last year's revenue, about 2/3 of the revenue came from about 30% of the revenue came, about 60% of the revenue came from the event that I did. And so that was about 130 people, average ticket price of $1,000. Speakers got in for free because, They're giving me their time. And then I sold some sponsorships. So like that's also a great like chunk of revenue for the business. But the most important part of the business is actually the subscription business, which is the smallest. It's only a high, a mid to high 5-figure business right now. Um, but it's the best barometer I have for whether or not this business is working. If people are not willing to pay for my content, I've got a problem. Um, I also like when I started this year, I knew how much subscription revenue I'd have as a baseline. I did not know how much ad revenue I'd have. And so like subscriptions are just, while it's the smallest chunk, it is the most important chunk.
And when you say most important chunk, do you mean that it's something that you need to focus on growing and becoming a bigger part of the pie?
Yeah, and that's a priority. So I spent the full like bulk of January really focused on locking up some big ad partners. I went from having an executive salary to not having an executive salary. So like again, sustainable media businesses they need cash. And so I spent the first month really just focused on closing up these renewals with some of my big partners. But going forward, the focus is on making the product stronger, right? So I'm bringing on additional freelance writers. If I increase the quality but the quantity of content, okay, that unlocks an opportunity for more growth. If I can create the right databases, whether that's tracking public company financials or the private equity owned media companies or whatever it is, that unlocks opportunities. So my goal is over the next few months to really cement what is the AMO Pro product so that when I start going out to do corporate subs, when I decide to increase the price of that subscription, I have something I can fall back on. Right now, it's just me. In 2 or 3 months, there should be many more voices. There should be many other benefits to being a subscriber.
Yeah. What you're trying to do is create sort of a ecosystem or package of products such that if a media company did not subscribe to it, they would be at a disadvantage or so. Like it's just table stakes almost.
That's my theory, right? Because like, there's nothing else out there for these operators, right?
Yeah.
There used to be, right? There used to be publications that served media executives, but they all shut down because for a number of reasons. Some are just poorly managed. Others got a little too focused on the ad tech side versus serving the publishers. Like, there's a real gap here, and I've been an operator.
Yeah.
Right? I've done the job. I know what goes into building these media businesses because I've done it. I did it at CoinDesk. I did it at ThomasNet. I did it at Morning Brew. I'm doing it at AMO. And so that gives me an advantage. And so, yeah, I think that there's, many don't subscribe. I'll change that at some point, but I think there's an opportunity to serve this audience.
Yeah. And the advertisers, who are they paying to, like, what's an example company and what decision maker are they paying to reach?
Yeah, so my biggest partner is a company called Omeda. They are a marketing automation software, but like they basically are your marketing automation, your ESP, your customer data platform, sort of wrapped into one. And their whole concept is once you are a media company that has a focused audience development person, your workflows are going to get crazy if you jump from tool to tool to tool. Right? Many of us have to log into our ESP and then we have to log it. If you have a CDP, you have to log into your CDP. You have to make sure those tools are connected, that the data is being transferred from one place to the other. Well, Omeda does that out of the box. And so what they're looking to do is they want to get in front of a lot of, either senior executives who understand that there's a problem, i.e., too many different tools, too much workflow complications. They have to hire more people to support these ad products, or just they want to get in front of the audience team who recognize that there's an opportunity for efficiency. And so they advertise with me because those are the people who read me. I write a lot about first party data because I think that if you don't have a first party data strategy in 2024, you're going to hurt. It's a little bit harder for podcasts because these are all on platforms. But if you own like an email list and you don't have first party data, you're going to struggle. They make it possible to collect both the declarative information as well as the behavioral and then activate that data in the platform so that they would advertise with me to get in front of the executives.
Yeah. That makes sense. And so let's zoom out a little bit. In a world where most people are bearish on media, why are you bullish? And what drives that?
Well, I'm bullish because people will always want good information, right? I think, I subscribe to the belief that if we look at like things like AI, they're great for efficiency, and they're great for, these tools are great for research. But at the end of the day, you still need a person to go out and get the information, right? So like I met this morning with a woman who, is a healthcare reporter, or a healthcare technology reporter. And she knows a ton of people in that space. And so she can talk to people. Then as she talks to them, she can contextualize that information. As she can contextualize that information, she can put it into a format people want to read. Will people like have an AI platform that aggregates that? Sure. I'm sure that that's a thing. At the end of the day, people need good information. And so long as people need good information, especially on the business side, but as long as there is a need for good information, people will pay for it, which means media companies will work. Will they be the mass scale media companies that continue to die? No. I think many of them are going to die. But could they be thousands of variations of a media operator? Yeah, I think so. And the nice thing about the internet is the internet's so big and there are so many niches that you can really niche down and find like your focus and make a good business out of it.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Hey, everybody. If you don't already subscribe to the Media Empires newsletter, you should. But that's not what I'm here to tell you about. The platform we use to power this and other Turpentine newsletters is called Beehiiv, and it's excellent. First of all, it was started by the same early team who helped build Morning Brew into a $75 million newsletter business. And they built Beehiiv to offer that same powerful functionality to anyone sending emails, from essayists to business owners. The platform is beautiful, their text editor is intuitive, and they help you scale your audience with custom growth features. Beehiiv has powerful tools to help you monetize your content. You can easily launch paid subscriptions or pursue an advertising model. The Beehiiv platform will even connect you to premium brands to sponsor your newsletter. Not only do we use them, but thousands of the top newsletters in the world also use them, like Milk Road, Blockworks, Newsletter Operator, and so many more. Beehiiv's founder hooked up Media Empires listeners with a sweet deal. Get 20% off for 3 months with code EMPIRES. Visit beehiiv.com, that's BEEHIIV.com, to get started. Hey everyone, Erik here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at erikaturpentine.co. That's ERIK at turpentine.co, and let's partner together.
Ben Thompson, of course, who's had this great newsletter for almost a decade, it seems. His big idea is aggregation theory, and sort of that the internet changes the sort of economics from sort of limited supply to unlimited supply, and so that sort of reorients value chains in lots of interesting ways. I'm curious, what are some of the core ideas that you keep coming back to? Is it that business media or media that informs kind of high leverage decisions is where the opportunity is, and continuing to niche down? Or what are some of the core ideas or philosophies that you keep coming back to?
Yeah, so everything boils down to a niche, right? Like I think one day I'll write a book that or something that says like niche is the future of scale. The deeper a niche you can go, the more money you can make. But like I look at the opportunities a couple of ways. I think yes, business media is a very straightforward opportunity, right? It is. Business executives need information. Business executives will pay for that information. As long as those business executives are there, advertisers will follow. I think that makes a lot of sense. I also think there's a lot of very interesting areas to play in high net worth passions, right? Like, I don't know if you have talked with Craig Fuller,
yes,
but like he owns, I don't even know how many publications anymore, all related to aviation and maritime. And then he just acquired the media assets from his company freight waves. Like, but if you look at aviation and marine, those are unbelievably price inelastic audiences, right? If you own an airplane, and I don't mean like a Taylor Swift private jet. I just mean like even like a personal prop plane that you just want to fly. If you own that, like you obviously have enough money to afford that. If you have enough money to afford that, and I tell you it's going to cost you $1,000 more to own that plane, you don't care, right? It's the same thing as luxury. If Louis Vuitton, I don't know if that's a good brand or not anymore because you can tell I really don't care. But if Louis Vuitton doubled the price of their bags, they probably would still sell them. And so I'm super interested in that. And so obviously he's focused on aviation and marine, but you could look at things like snowboarding and skiing. You could look at things like golf, wine aficionado or cigar aficionado. Like those audiences have money. And as long as you really dig in there, like you can serve those audiences. I think, where people get concerned when we talk about this is, okay, business media, money, high net worth individuals, or, these high price inelastic markets, money. Well, what about like people who don't have money? What about local news and things like that? That's tough business, right? It's not going to not be a tough business. I think the way to make local news work is to tie it to a business angle. Um, like I live in Westchester County, which is just north of New York City, and like I've long wondered, like, could I just launch like Westchester Business? And it's I cover topics that are important to a business audience, but like, what do businesses care about? They want to know if their local government is going to screw them over some way. They want to know where their tax dollars are going to because they're paying a lot. And so, like, I think there are ways to do local news, um, but I care a lot about like just core B2B stuff, and then these luxury like media brands.
Yeah. And so how much of it is Freight Waves or Blockworks, for example, who you had at your conference,
Yeah.
is it doing what they've done but for every category, or is it more shallow in the sense of, Industry Dive is not is a publication, it's not a whole sort of suite of media products, but just getting more and more nicheified, or is it both? Like, I guess the hypothetical thought experiment is like, if you had a ton of cash and you were running an incubator or venture capital firm focused on media businesses, let's say not venture capital firm, but just you were trying to build as much enterprise value as possible, and you weren't constrained by talent or capital, where do you think are the real opportunities, and how would you be thinking about that?
So we did this at Morning Brew a little bit, right? We had marketing brew, retail brew, healthcare brew, HR brew, like et cetera, et cetera. And now they're not my children anymore, so I can forget to say some of them.
And did they work?
They all worked. They all made a lot of money, and they all made a lot of money profitably. Now we were fortunate to have the backing of the daily newsletter to help us with our growth, but they were great products. Within each of those, there are numerous potential publications, right? So you look at marketing, right? Marketing brew, there are three constituents in the marketing industry, right? There is the brand who has a product to advertise. There is the agency that handles the purchase of advertising. And then there is the publisher or the platform that runs the advertising. Well, you have publications about each of those, right? And so you do the same thing with retail, right? You've got big box retail, you've got e-commerce, you've got DTC, a subset of e-commerce, right? Healthcare, you've got healthcare tech, women's health, biotech, pharma, right? Because biotech is small, pharma is big. Like there's just, you can go and take these industries and you can slice them, right? And you can really go in deep on them where, there's a media company that has publications. One is about the US Army, one is about the US Navy, one is about the Marine Corps, and just like serves those audiences. So you can definitely go super niche. None of them are ever going to be $100 million businesses on their own. But if you develop the playbook, and this is what Industry Dive did, this is what we did at Morning Brew, like none of Industry Dive's publications generate gobs and gobs of, well, it depends on how you define gobs and gobs of money. None of them are 9-figure businesses, but in aggregate, they make 9 figures, and it's a playbook. So, that is how I think you scale, right? Like I think you can build a media company that is worth $1 billion, but it is a house of brands, and it will take you decades to get there. Like, you can't. I don't believe you can fast track it, especially not anymore with the platforms getting harder with distribution. But I think with a long enough time horizon, you could. But it's not any one single publication. It is many, many publications.
And when you guys did Marketing Brew or Retail Brew, how I understand that Industry Dive just hires kind of journalists in the sense that they don't have to have domain expertise. Did you do something similar, or how do you think about being able to serve like what does a template look like in terms of being able to serve these niches that you may not have domain expertise in?
Yeah, so we hired reporters, and we had editors. A publication could have anywhere from one editor and 2 to 4 or 5 reporters. Just ultimately depended on the frequency of that newsletter. The interesting thing about journalism is you don't actually need to be a domain expert to be able to write about a topic. You have to, and this is where good editors can come into play. You have to like put your biases aside. But good reporting is simply asking good questions. And once you've asked those questions, you can contextualize that information, right? And say, okay, I've talked to 3 different sources about this topic. Let me pull that together in a format that is easy to understand, right? And this is where like the lead and the nut graph and all that comes from. Whether that's still a viable format in 2024, who knows? But you can definitely do that. And the nice thing is over time you start to become an expert, right? Like, our Retail Brew reporters, they might not have been experts, but if they continue to do it, they will at some point become just like subject matter expertise because they talk to enough sources. And ultimately, the way that a reporter learns is just by having conversations. The way this is a de facto on the record conversation, but you and I could have had this off the record, behind the scenes, and we both would learn things, and we would both become smarter. That's the function of a reporter. Is they have these kind of conversations and then they turn that into a story. So you don't need to be a subject matter expert. It helps, which is why if you've been doing it longer, you get paid more, you get poached by Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal or CNBC. That's all true, but you have to be willing to talk to people. Now, the issue is people don't want to pick up the phone and talk anymore. So reporters are more resistant to that exercise, which is a problem, because if you're just emailing your questions to people, it just hits their PR team and everything is super crafty. You can't have a conversation. This is how you learn, right? It's harder to do that in email. But yeah, you can do it with reporters.
And I think one question as we move to just more business media paradigm is like, do reporters just become more business minded? For example, like did reporters at Morning Brew have P&Ls, or did they, sort of, did they think, usually there was this divide, right, between editorial and business, but is that kind of over in a world of business media, or how do you guys think about it?
Yeah, look, I think that it depends on the business, right? Like at Morning Brew, I managed our P&L. I managed each of our publications' P&Ls, and I made sure that we were, things were good. It's part of a broader business, right? So like I managed the B2B P&L, but Austin managed the overall Morning Brew P&L, and like at the end of the day, he's the CEO, so it's his business. The reporters, the way we structured it is we told the reporters to focus on the storytelling, right? Because we were an ad business, so I didn't really want them to worry about like who the advertisers were. Our editors were aware of that, so that if we were doing a story about an advertiser, we could let our sales team know, so that if there were any ads that were going to run at the same time, we would move the ads. So we had a process for that. But I don't think that the reporters need to be involved in that exercise. However, I do not think that reporters should be blind to how the business works. I think that reporters need to understand that they are serving an audience. And especially in business media, they need to understand that they are serving a very specific audience who needs really good information. And the only way the business works is if you give them great information, right? And so like, I've always struggled with the concept of someone being anti-capitalism, but then being a business reporter. Like those things don't make sense to me, right? I also have a hard time understanding how you can be, be speculative, be skeptical, be curious, But like being a pessimist, I don't think really is a great thing. I think a lot of reporters have fallen into this game of pessimism, which like to some extent, like fair for them. They get fired every 18 months because they keep joining these shitty media companies. Um, but no, I don't think you need to give them P&Ls. They do
Yeah,
need to understand how the business works.
right. Talk about the intersection between media and sort of SaaS or data companies, like, FreightWaves and Blockworks as an
Yeah.
example. Like, do you think that is an example that should be applied to every industry or every big industry, or is that like overplayed, or are these exceptions to the rule? Like, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I call it the SaaSification of media. I like that model a lot, and I think it is something that media companies have an advantage of over like pure play SaaS businesses. So as you identify an industry, and we'll just use FreightWaves as the example, or because it's a great business. Like they were writing about trucking, and they were writing about logistics, and they were writing about supply chain, and so they were acquiring all this audience. At some point, they had to invest, and this is where they raised a bunch of money, and they built up a separate team to do this. They had to invest to go build that software. Um, the nice thing about that business is they use the data from the platform in their reporting, which is automatic marketing for the platform. Bloomberg does the same thing. Bloomberg will pull things from the terminal and put it into the stories, right? And so Bloomberg is the single greatest example of the SaaSification of media. But the nice thing about that is you effectively reduce the cost of user acquisition, because not only are you promoting your software product, but you're also running ads against the content. And so it can get to the point where you actually have a negative CAC, where you basically get paid to promote your product and grow your software business. And so it worked really well for FreightWaves. It's earlier days for Blockworks. I suspect it will work, though crypto is a tough business and it's so cyclical that I suspect the research business will crush over the next 18 months, and then they'll see a lot of churn as people as the mob of crypto crazies disappear. I've spent too many years of my life in that industry. But if we look at a FreightWaves, it works up until a point, and then it actually winds up holding you back. And the reason it holds you back is because of how businesses are valued. So a media business is valued on EBITDA. It tends to get a lower multiple, especially ad-based ones, versus SaaS-based, like pure play SaaS businesses. They just tend to trade at a higher multiple. The issue is what do you do when you have a media business, which trades at one multiple, and you have a SaaS business that trades at another multiple? How does a prospective buyer look at that? Well, two problems present themselves. The first is what is the universe of potential buyers that want both a media asset and a SaaS asset? Well, that universe is smaller, which means if there are fewer prospective buyers, you don't have as much like upward pressure to go higher multiple. But the other issue is you get what's known as a conglomerate discount. I actually think this is a problem for News Corp, right? Because they've got so many different assets. Is you because investors don't know how to value you, they just assign a discount to you. And it's not like it's not like, we're going to assign 10% or 15%. It's just they don't know. Because they don't know, they pull back a little bit. And so at some point, you have to split those businesses if you want to maximize value creation. If you don't care about like enterprise value, if this is like if you owned the business outright and you're just going to own the thing forever, and like you're going to leave it to your children and you don't care, okay, then you don't have to. But if the idea is you are going to want to sell your business one day, you've actually got to split those assets, because the software business can get a much higher multiple, because the world of buyers for pure play SaaS is just much higher than the world of blended SaaS and media.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, that's what we just saw with FreightWaves, as you wrote about. And so is it easier for media companies to become SaaS companies, or SaaS companies to also become media companies, and should more be trying?
It's hard for both. And ultimately, the reason it's hard for both is because the DNA of each of those businesses is in conflict, right? A media business has to ship product every single day. especially if you're a news based, right? Like if you're doing reporting where like you're talking to sources and you're publishing stories, like in many respects, those stories, they don't, their lifetime value is not very long. And so like reporters got to show up the next day. I always say that if Google fired everyone tomorrow, as long as they had like, I don't know, an AI to pay the hosting bills, that business, you would never know. But if reporters just stopped showing up one day, you would know because like there would just be no new content. And so there's a DNA, right, for a media company that is different than like for a software company where like, yeah, you might operate in 2 week sprints because you're an agile business, but like it still might take you 6 months to release a new feature. And so I think there's some contention there. Second, there's the cost structure associated with that. Like engineers are just ridiculously expensive. And so I think that plays in. But I do think that if you can get over that hump and it will only work, I think, with founder led companies, and you have the resources to invest in that, and you have a disruptive industry that does need data, right? Like, I don't think this would work for AMO because I just don't think there's anything really fascinating from a data perspective, but there is a need for high quality data. I do think that the media company has the advantage because they have the audience and you get those benefits of negative CACs that a pure play SaaS business doesn't get.
So these media companies that should be going into these niches, whether it's you mentioned sort of retail as an example, or healthcare, or others, the ones that you guys did at Morning Brew, but there are others. How do you advise them thinking about, hey, could I build a data company on top of this or a SaaS product on top of this, and what is the right way of thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've never actually built a data business, right? I think that I think you've had Anand from CB Insights on the show. He's a freaking genius about this sort of stuff. His concept that really resonates with me is his concept of like sawdust data and like identifying what data other companies are kicking off that just like that's they view it as sawdust, but you can actually make it into something. There's also the concept of like data co-ops. Ultimately, like if you're building any sort of product, you need to know that there's going to be customers for it, right? And so I suspect it's industries that are going through disruption. I suspect it's industries where data changes quickly, right? Like the price of trucking, which is what Craig's business is, right? With Sonar, the prices change so often. So you need to pay for it because like, it can have 7-figure impacts on businesses, 8-figure impacts if you're Amazon. So like that's meaningful. So I'm not the best qualified, I don't think, to talk about like what makes it great. I can tell you if I see it, right? Like I think Sonar is a great product. I think that Blockworks is going to be cyclical, right? I think that research is an interesting business, but like crypto just is so tough.
What do you think about the AI space in terms of if I wanted to build and go deep and build an AI media company or maybe a data company on top of it? How would you advise me there?
I'd advise you not to.
Say more.
But well, so here's my issue with technology specific media companies, right? AI or, there were so many publications when the internet was coming up, is that they're novel. Like, yes, it's a new thing right now. And like, let's focus on this new technology. But at some point, the technology becomes like the story becomes less about the technology itself and more about the applicability to individual niches. So whether it's 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, I will care less about, oh, look, OpenAI did something new. Oh, look, like this new thing is a thing, right? That'll be great for the the fanboys about a technology. But what I will care more about is what's the applicability of AI to media? That's my industry, right? Or if you're in retail, what's the applicability of AI to retail? And so I think that a pure play like AI publication, who is the audience for that?
What about like an AI industry dive where it's like how AI will impact all these different categories?
Well, I think that Industry Dive could hire a technology reporter for each of their publications. I suspect they already do, right? Like we did that at Morning Brew where, we had a reporter who's up for many of the publications whose job was to understand technology and innovation and things like that. Look, I used to run Tech Brew, which had close to like 500,000 subscribers. I could have turned that into AI Brew in a day, and it would have been the largest AI newsletter out there. We could have turned that newsletter into every 6 months when a new technology comes out, just like, call it something new. But I think that I care much more about industry or job function specific content than I do about like just a pure play technology. We saw this happen during the internet times, right? There was the, what was it called? It's a good book about it. I think it's called The Industry Standard. The book is called Starving to Death on 200 Million. They built that business up to a massive business. Like they were generating an obscene amount of money. 18 months later, they were bankrupt because the dot-com bubble burst. And then like, who needs an internet publication anymore? We're all internet companies now. I think this is the same risk for TechCrunch, right? Like startups were once this thing, right? It was like, ooh, there's this weird concept of a startup. It's a tech company. Now, every publication can talk about tech startups. Do we really need one like home base for them? I'm not convinced.
Right. And so instead of doing AI meets healthcare, AI meets, media, AI meets retail, just do retail, just do healthcare, just do media, and AI would just sort of be a part of that.
Yeah, or go one step farther. If you want to do retail innovation as a publication, you could do retail innovation, right? And you might spend the next 2 years talking only about AI, but picking a topic that has an industry tied to it tells you who the audience is, right? Like I couldn't tell you, and maybe the AI newsletters out there do know, I could not tell you who the audience is other than people who are really into AI. But here's the thing, those same people were also really into crypto 2 years ago, right? Like the joke is all the crypto VCs suddenly became AI VCs, and then they're going to be crypto VCs again in 2 years. And so when you're chasing something that's really like a fad, whether it has longevity or not, that's a risky business. And I like the idea of building media businesses for years or decades, not for 18 months.
Yeah, fascinating. And so you had a recent post on TechCrunch where you talked about one of the problems with TechCrunch is that they think they have an audience, but really they just have traffic, and they don't actually have an audience. Unpack what you're trying to get at that piece, because I see myself as wanting to rebuild some of the cultural significance that TechCrunch had with what I'm doing, which I'll get into in a bit. Yeah. So I would love to hear sort of your analysis on TechCrunch.
So Danny, I'm not even going to try to say his last name. I think it's Creighton, but
he just came on the podcast.
Yeah. So he put a really good post out about TechCrunch, right? Because he was the founding editor of TC Plus. I think they called it Crunch something before that, and talked about like why it didn't work, and TechCrunch is a business. The issue was, and one thing he said in that piece was like 90% of their traffic at TechCrunch came from Google, and that is addictive, right? I have seen what it's like to get millions of users from Google. It happened to us at CoinDesk. I started at CoinDesk in late 2016. And so by the end of 2017, the price of Bitcoin had hit $20,000, right? It was like 900 when I started. It was 20,000 a year later. We went from under 1 million monthly unique users to over 12 million monthly unique users. We thought we were gods. We thought nothing could go wrong. And then the bubble burst. And then our traffic cratered to like 2 million users. So look, we were still up, right? But like we were not 12 million. But the issue is that like when you see the 12 million, you make financial decisions based off of what you know. And then we learn the cycles. And so when you are dependent on traffic, right? When you're dependent on the platforms to send you numbers, you start to tell stories that you know will get you those numbers. And so Danny said it right in the piece. They would write about Elon or Apple or these big tech companies, which would drive a ton of traffic. The issue is that traffic was not the audience that they cared about. The audience they cared about are startup founders. And so there's a disconnect there, right? And now they were, one of the things he said was that they were able to charge more for ads because of that. Okay, but like only so far. And if you go look at TechCrunch today, it's a lot of programmatic advertising. Right? I'm looking to buy a standing desk. I have seen a standing desk ad running on TechCrunch, which means they're not actually doing a good job selling this mass audience that they have, because advertisers realized, wait a second, we want to get in front of the startups. That's not working. So having traffic is really just like step one. You need to get traffic to build a business, but having an audience is either having their brand loyalty, i.e., they come back to your site irrespective of the story, having them signed up for your newsletter, i.e., like you have the ability to push information to them. But like just because a user comes from Google and lands on your site does not mean that they are your user or that they are your audience. They are simply flying by, stopping for, it's like a highway. They're stopping at McDonald's on the, at the pit stop, getting their Big Mac, and then they're off.
That relates to another thing you've talked about, which is acquisitions. You talked about the hustle and
Yeah.
how when the hustle sold to HubSpot, one question is how much did they go to read the hustle versus how much did they go to read Sampar or sort of, and so talk about this tension and whether you expect more acquisitions like that to happen and whether they should happen. Are they effective?
Sam built a great business in that he was the early voice of the hustle, but like I don't even know if he was writing by the time the hustle sold, right? I think at that point, like he was the CEO, but he had writers who were writing. So that is the thing that has to happen for anything to be valuable when it sells. You have to make this transition from the face of it to like somebody else writing it. And like it's the same thing with Morning Brew, right? Like that was Alex and Austin in the early days, but like the Morning Brew voice, the thing that everyone loves so much comes from this guy Neil, right? He's the managing editor of the daily newsletter. He's on their podcast. He created the Morning Brew voice. Now that has been stylized, right? There's a style guide so that everyone knows how to write in that voice, but like he's the one who created it. And so Sam built a great business, but I don't think that Sam was doing I would bet every dollar in my pocket that Sam was not doing the newsletter when they sold. Now, to be fair, I have no cash in my pocket, so don't, you're not getting much out of me. It might have been his voice though, right? There, I'm sure he approved of that voice and did that. But that's an important thing that a lot of creators, myself included, need to be cognizant of. AMO is valueless if it remains the Jacob Show, because I am a key man risk. If you decide you want to buy AMO, right? You're going to turn this business into something great, but you want my media business to support that. The first thing you're going to say to me, Jacob, is how long are you going to stick around? Well, if I want to sell, that probably means I would like to retire at some point. Well, that's going to factor into the acquisition price. If, however, I have a team of writers who are writing for AMO, if I have, so it's not just my voice, well, it can live on without me. That is a transition that all these creators are going to have to decide. You can see it with like Newcomer, right? He isn't starting to bring on other voices. So now it's not just the Erik Show. It is going to become a business. And every time I see one of his things, he just put something up today. He's doing his banking summit. It's the Newcomer Banking Summit. I'm like, this dude literally came from Bloomberg and called himself I love it. I hope one day he becomes the next Bloomberg. I just think that'd be so cool.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Just on the Bloomberg front, so many people have pitched themselves as the Bloomberg for X or the Bloomberg for Y, but it doesn't seem to materialize. It feels like that's just a really hard business to build.
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, Bloomberg is such a sticky product, right? Where it has become it's not just like a data business. It is a tool, right? My girlfriend used to work at a hedge fund, and I visited her once, and literally every single person on the floor had a Bloomberg, except for her. She was an assistant. She didn't need the Bloomberg, right? But everyone else had it. That was their tool. And so that once you become part of someone's workflow, it is really hard to change that, right? You just get cemented in it. But the second thing that Bloomberg did that a lot of people don't talk about is there is actually a messaging ability in Bloomberg where you can actually send a message to a broker. Do you want to be on the outside of that walled garden? If you are a trader or you are doing anything like that, you don't want to be on the outside, which is an intense moat. And so everyone who thinks that they're going to build the Bloomberg of X, and I've seen so many pitches about the Bloomberg of crypto, like when it becomes important enough, Bloomberg is going to build it, and they will build it within their ecosystem. They're not going to buy you because Bloomberg actually doesn't buy things very often. They will just build it internally. And yeah, so no, like if anyone ever came to me and said, I'm going to build the Bloomberg of X, I would not invest. That doesn't mean that data businesses can't work, but like specifically targeting the financial services industry, that's a tough tough business.
What about the freight waves for X?
I think
Or
the freight waves
Blockworks?
for X makes sense. I think the biggest risk for freight waves is, could Bloomberg one day? No, I don't actually think that'll happen, because like the people who use the data within freight waves, if they're not financial, like they're not hedge funds or whatever, and if they are, like, I think it's a small subset. Like those are operators using that tool. And so, yeah, I think the freight waves of X, great business plan, right? If you can figure out data that helps your customers with their businesses, whatever that industry is, I think there's a play.
And are freight waves and Blockworks the same thing, or
No.
like for all intents and purposes, or is there, when we say that the Blockworks or freight waves for X, are we talking about something different?
So I think there's two things. I think freight waves is a data tool that is trying to become part of people's workflows, right? And so, like, if you are looking to price out, I'm not 100% intimate on Sonar, but if you're looking to price out your, like, the price for trucks or trucking shipping, you would use Sonar to determine how much you should be paying, right? And I think that is a workflow thing where the people at Amazon who are doing that sort of mass shipments, that's part of their workflow. As far as I understand it right now, what Blockworks has built is more of a research tool, where you're paying for like access to really great in-depth research. That stuff used to come from the banks. I think there were research shops at the banks. I think they do a lot less research now. But that's, I think, what Blockworks is building. The question is, to really be like a long-lasting SaaSification of media, you've got to somehow figure out how to get into the workflow. Sonar has done that. I don't know what Blockworks has, but they're still like, they're early still, right? Like when I had Jason on at my event, I think he had only been doing this for under a year. So, like, could he at some point get into the workflow? Yes. But the question is, who is the customer that's going to use that? It's probably financial institutions, in which case Bloomberg is going to come with something that will do it for them, that will not require that user to leave Bloomberg.
Yeah, and when you say under a year, you mean under a year via using in sort of the research or tool side of the business. They've been doing the events and content for longer.
I love Blockworks business, right? I didn't love them when I was at CoinDesk.
Yeah.
Right. They were the small little annoying media company that did a great job targeting institutional investors. But now, as an independent, I love their business. I love Jason. I think he's a great operator. He's built a great business. I think he's been profitable every step of the way, which I respect the ever living daylights out of that. Their events are good. Their media business is good. They do good reporting. But and look, their research business is good. I'm sure of that. But it doesn't. I think it's different. A research business and a workflow data business are just different things.
Yeah. By the way, it is interesting that newcomer chose banking to do a summit on. If you asked me 10 topics he might do one on, I would have guessed AI, but I wouldn't have guessed banking. And so, yeah, I wonder if that will work. So,
I suspect it will. Right. I suspect, he's got a good niche, and the good thing about these sort of really niche businesses is you can talk to your people. Like I said, at the top of the show, I have a reader. He's one of the co-founders of Aging Media, this guy, John, and he's been pushing me to do an event for years. And I finally relented last year. And that's why I did the event, is because John just kept pestering the shit out of me. And then once I announced it, everyone else was like, oh shit, this is going to be awesome. But the nice thing about these businesses is you can talk to your readers, right? I put a call out before I even signed a venue, saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing an event in October. It's going to cost probably around $1,000 a ticket. Would you come? And like 40 people replied to that email saying, yep, I'll be there. I mean, that's a great sign. And so, he must be talking to people that say that banking is an important topic for him. And if that's the case, then rock and roll.
That's fascinating. Going back to crypto for a second, I'm curious what you think we've learned, or what are some of the lessons as it relates to crypto media? Like I always think when you want to cover an industry, there's like news, there's analysis, there's research, there's kind of different kinds of media that can do well. What do you think are, either putting aside the cyclical part of it, what are lessons around like the different approaches one can take when covering an industry and trying to carve out a position?
Yeah. So if we look at crypto, I think that the big lesson that I've sort of gleaned from that is there are three audience types in crypto. There is, I think, three. Let me go through the list to make sure I'm right about that. The first is like the diehard audience, right? And these are the people who are there through thick and thin. They've owned they've owned their crypto for years. They love it when the prices are down. They love it when the prices are up. That's one subset of the audience. Then there's like what, at CoinDesk we called the crypto curious. These are the people who are like, they don't get involved until Thanksgiving when like you talk about it with them. And then they're like, okay, fine, I'll buy a little bit of crypto. And they only care about it until the price plummets. Then you could look at a different audience, and that's like the professional audience, right? And this is why I was always so frustrated with Blockworks, is I really wanted CoinDesk to go after that professional audience. But like we at that point had such a mass scale business, we couldn't to focus on that would just have been like a diversion of resources. And so Blockworks was able to come in and really just like gobble up that area. They do a great job. They do. This is like turning into like the Blockworks fanboy show. But like they have built like great events tied specifically to institutional investors. And so if you look at crypto, you've got three plays from an audience perspective. You either serve the crazy dedicated people, right? And within that, you can go pretty tribal and you can have a Bitcoin only publication. And I think Bitcoin Magazine is only on Bitcoin. You could have an Ethereum only publication, or you could take it one step farther and have like a Web3 like thing if you want to, for all the, I don't know how it's going to change the world. You can have a publication for those people, but they're diehards, right? Those are the people who are in it they're in it forever. That's their thing. You could have a consumer publication, right? Which is, I think, which is CoinDesk's digital business is really that, because like those people are landing on that site because they Google the price of Bitcoin. It is the dopamine addicts, the people who look at the price of Bitcoin 20 times a day. I had to delete these apps from my phone because I was doing the same thing, right? I was addicted to it, especially when the prices are moving. And then there's the third audience, the institutional investors, the professional investors. I think it's hard to serve them all well.
Yeah. And so how about at Morning Brew, when you guys thought about a new industry, what is sort of the template where you said, hey, our newsletter has to appeal to this specific type of customer in this specific type of way that we can scale? Like, talk a little bit about the formula.
Yeah. So the formula, and it's not an original formula, right? Like Sean Griffey, the CEO of Industry Dive, talks about the same exact formula. I think he might use some slightly different words. So the formula that we used, and basically the research I would do for every publication we would launch, was step one is to look to see if there is an industry that is going through disruption. Disruption is an important thing because that determines two things. One, is there going to be something to write about? Right? If nothing is happening in an industry, what are you going to write about? Two, if there is disruption, and this is where like there's a caveat to that, there's a likelihood for investment, right? And so this is something that Sean will say that I don't often say very much, but like it's a good point, is if there is disruption and significant capital investment, it's a great business. So the very first thing you look for is there disruption. The second thing we looked for is their audience. Right. And so we looked at that two ways. One, we looked at that within the Morning Brew ecosystem. Do we have this audience? And we had increasingly been capturing first party data. So we knew that better and better. But we also would just look at things like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because that would tell us are the job functions or these industries, are they growing? Are they shrinking? Or what's going on there? And then the third thing we would look at is are there sponsors? Right. And this is where it comes back to capital investment. If there are not tons and tons of sponsors trying to get in front of that audience, you just, as an ad business, you're going to struggle. And so, yeah, those are the things we look for. Are there stories? Is there an audience? And are there sponsors? The best validator is, are there other competitors? I think competition is the best thing that you can look for when trying to launch a new publication. It runs counter to everything that Peter Thiel might write about competition is bad, whatever. But competition is validation. If other publications are making it work, there's something there. And at the end of the day, media is an operating business. There is no secret sauce. There is no like secret strategies. It is who is the better operator, who is the better writer, who is the better seller, who is the better audience development person. That is it. And so if there's competition out there and you think that you're better than them, you can beat them. We did it at Morning Brew. We had great writers. They did great work. That's why we were able to acquire audiences and also monetize really well. So I look for a competition as a validator.
And when you see competition, how do you think about differentiating in the sense of, okay, you described a formula for how you pick spaces. Let's say you've picked these spaces and now you're going to create newsletters in them. How do you make sure that people go to you instead of Industry Dive for the same topic or some other competitor of the same topic? How do you think about sort of the formula of the actual content?
Well, so I think it depends. For Morning Brew, I didn't care, right? Because I knew that I could get the audience to a sufficient scale pretty quickly. And like, again, the internet's so big, I could get my audience that I needed. If you're just starting out, right? If you're an independent, and this is something that like, it's an important point. If you're looking at like a retail dive or a retail brew, you're not going to compete with them on retail because they cover so much. So pick just one piece of it. Become the absolute best at e-commerce and just focus on that, because you will be able to go deeper than we would have been able to. And then as that business grows, you can start to expand. So start off as e-commerce, and then maybe you expand and now you have a big box component to it, right? You're like, hey, we're now doing two things, not one thing. But like, you need to really start small. So if you see these publications, figure out the smallest possible niche that you can do. That's not like one person, right? But like the smallest possible niche you can focus on. For me, it was niche media companies. I didn't care. I don't care about streaming. I don't care about. I write about podcasting every once in a blue moon, but like I don't talk about any of that stuff. I talk about like it's primarily text-based niche media companies, and I really like SaaSification of media, so I talk about that when Craig does something crazy. But like that is my niche. Could I expand? Of course I could, right? Could I start to move into streaming and podcasting like as areas of coverage? Yes, but I got to focus on something really narrow, and that's the play. Use competition to validate, and then like pick one of their categories as your category.
That's well said. But even for the retail dive, because you have Morning Brews, scale, what is the directions to the reporter in terms of how to think about what to cover and what makes a good newsletter in this category?
So the newsletters have evolved where now we look at them. We looked at them as more as like publications. So we had a number of categories that we picked as like our coverage areas, and then we assigned our reporters to focus on those coverage areas. This is like, it's a standard media thing where you have beat reporters, right? And one of our reporters really, for like Marketing Brew, really was focused on ad tech and like that world. That's just what he focused on, and he talked to sources about that all the live long day. That's how you do it. You have to you give them guardrails, right? And you say you're going to focus on X, you're going to focus on Y, but then you let them go off and talk to sources, right? Like good storytelling in reporting is, some of it is assigning stories, but some of it is them coming to you with story ideas. I'm starting to bring on freelance writers for AMO, and there are stories I want written, but I'm also curious like about the stories other people have. A reporter came to me and wants to talk about how the creative agencies within media companies like Vox Creative and things like that have evolved. I hadn't thought about that story. Sounds really interesting. Tell me what it is. Right. And so you give them guardrails, but you let them go find the stories. And the way they find the stories is talking to people.
It's interesting. One thing I sort of, as I talk to journalists, I sense that some people really care about telling a great story, right? They care about sort of the human interest side, or some of them. And in business media, I guess I care about, and these aren't at odds. They go together, but not always, sort of information that helps a decision maker in some way. Yep. And so sometimes when I talk to, let's say, tech journalists, they'll want to say, oh, but let's talk about how this person has a lavish personal life, or something that doesn't necessarily tie to sort of like business objective. Did you see that at all in managing reporters on the business side, or no?
Not really. That stuff didn't matter, because that stuff doesn't matter to our audience. And this is where it comes back to, again, who your audience is and who you're trying to serve. right? TechCrunch, if we look at TechCrunch as an example, the reason that I'm hesitant about the traffic stuff is like when you're chasing traffic, salacious stuff wins.
Yeah.
And so like Elon Musk having 17 children is super interesting. But like if you run a publication about space, right? And what is SpaceX doing? Who cares how many children Elon Musk has? That doesn't matter. And so you can still do like profiles on people and you can still talk about that sort of stuff, but that doesn't, what somebody does in their personal life, they could throw orgies for all I care about. It doesn't matter relative to the decisions that they're making as a business operator. Right. Unless like you could make the argument that it matters from like are the personal decisions impacting the business? Yes. Sure. That is justifiably covered in a business publication.
Totally.
But the issue is so many like publications that call themselves business publications. I'm not going to use the name, but we all know which one I'm talking about, I think. They call themselves a business publication, but they're not. Like they're just chasing mass traffic. If you're chasing mass traffic, you're going to write stupid stories.
And what I'm curious about, as a lot of them have been sort of, tragically laid off and are now looking for new jobs, is that something that they want to do? Or are they just, are some people who want to write salacious stories or human interest stories, is a more charitable term for it? Or is that same person also want to write about news or information that moves business in some way? Because that's less exciting to some people. It's less idealistic to some people, certainly if they're anti-capitalist.
I mean, look, if they want to write those sorts of like whatever those types of stories are, then go do it and go try to figure out how to do it. And it's like culture reporters, right? Like I don't know what a culture reporter does. I really don't know what a culture reporter does. I think a culture reporter was interesting 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I guess. How old's the internet? 25, whatever. I think that was very interesting then because like if you wanted to know what Leonardo DiCaprio was doing, well, you had to read the culture publications. If that mattered to you, to read those. Now, Kim Kardashian tells you what she's doing on social media every damn day. What is a culture reporter going to do?
Right.
They're going to tell you what she did 6 hours after she told you what she did. Right. And so like, if you want to, like, to some extent, the market decides what you get to write about. And the market doesn't care enough about any of these stupid stories to pay for it. The market doesn't care. You don't have a job. Whereas the market cares about business information.
Right.
The market cares about that sort of stuff. And therefore, you can have a job. And so I think that any reporter that wants to be a reporter, wants to hold power to account even, you can do that through the lens of business. You can do that. You're not going after the individual about their personal life, but if like they're a corrupt business person, focus on that.
Yeah.
You can still hold power to account as a business reporter.
And feel free to defer if you don't want to answer this, but let's say you were put in charge of Business Insider tomorrow. And everyone asks you, hey, what's the direction? Where should this company pivot? Or what should we do? Would you say, hey, follow a similar path to what Industry Dive and Morning Brew have done? Is that too vague? Or how would you think about that?
I really don't want that job. And look, they're good people there. I've met many of them, right? And like, I don't think that like this team they're bad people. I just think it's a bad business. It's a business that was built on an era of mass distribution. If I was running Business Insider, I would fragment Business Insider and identify the areas where they do great business reporting and focus on those publications. Their advertising desk, like where they talk about like, the advertising industry and all that, it's actually a pretty good team. Where it was. I don't know if it still is. I don't know if they're still there. And so I would dig into that. But like human interest stories, yeah, I don't want that job.
Yeah.
I really don't want that job.
I had Danny on the other day, the former TechCrunch reporter we were talking about. And one thing I pitched to him is, hey, I asked him, how would you do TechCrunch differently today? Let's say, benefit of hindsight. And what I sort of proposed to him is maybe the audience wasn't necessarily the right one in the sense, or the monetization model. Like TechCrunch served startup founders, but startup founders don't have a lot of money, especially when they're getting off the ground. But who has a lot of money is venture capitalists. And venture capitalists' job is to identify which startups to invest in. And so, there are these companies like Tegus, for example. Tegus, for the audience, is an expert network that like a Garcia Lemmer Group, GLG, that records the calls and then sells the transcripts to VCs. And when people have those calls, they're often looking to learn more about a company or a market to determine an investment.
Yep.
And so reading the transcripts allows you to kind of do that in a more scalable way. And you can imagine TechCrunch also saying, hey, we educate people about startups and markets. Maybe we could sell similar package to, and Tigas costs $25,000 per seat. So they charge a fuck
lot
ton.
of money.
Yeah. And so maybe TechCrunch, maybe their plus offering is also, using the insights they get on companies and the great brand that they have and markets. Maybe they sell to VCs. What do you think about that idea?
I think it's a clearly defined audience as to who you're selling to. And to be fair, that's kind of their model with their event, right? The startups get to come for pretty low price, if anything, and the VCs have to pay a lot of money. And the vendors have to pay a lot of money. So, whether it's a Tigas model or anything, I think that model would work a lot more because you know who the customer is.
Yes.
Right. The VC is the customer. Now, I think that VCs oftentimes are pretty cheap.
Yes.
I've noticed many VCs sign up for AMO. Don't know why. It's not a good business for them. And they will share it with their entire team with one subscription. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing? I know you're AUM. This is stupid. But whatever. I won't bash an entire job profession. But yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense, right? You are talking to all these startup founders as a media company. You're building these relationships. You're building these deep understandings of them, turning that information into something that VCs have to pay a ton of money for is a great idea, right?
Yeah, totally. I know this is not your beat, but I want to hear your opinion on podcasts and podcasting businesses. I've thought, hey, could you rebuild Industry Dive or some of Morning Brew's different topics, but via podcasting, and then sort of moving them to get first party data. Substack has a podcasting feature where you can get emails, stuff like that. But I'm curious just how you think about the business of podcasting and then sort of vertical media podcasting.
I think that any sort of format specific media is fine, right? Podcasts are fine, video is fine, newsletters are fine, text is fine, VR will be fine at some point. It's all fine. The most important thing is, are you delivering good content? I like newsletters just because a lot of people have email on their phones. And so it's a good way to get right into their phone. It's a good push mechanism. But podcasts are great too. And so I think that's what you're building, right? Is you're building a network of niche specific podcasts, all about specific industries or job functions or I don't know if it's asset classes or whatever. The tricky thing with podcasts, I think, is that they are far more dependent on platforms than newsletters. Yeah, newsletters Google can screw around with Gmail and create the promotions folder and create all that. And that's true. And that certainly hurts. Podcasts, you're at their whims. And that I'm always concerned about that. I don't like building on rented land. That said, I have a podcast. It's going to come back in the next couple of weeks. I think it's a good part. People are dying for it to come back. So I would bring it back. But I don't think the most important thing is the content. If you're creating great content, whether it's written, VR, video podcast, just create great content. The monetization follows from there. And if you can figure out how to charge for a podcast versus just an ad business, I guess that makes sense. I don't know how you do that. Substack, I guess, has a way, but it's
Ben Thompson does it. There's some people who are able to make it work, but we haven't tried it yet because I think we're just getting really good ad rates on our podcasts, and so we're just driving. We just don't want to cut our traffic too much at the expense of that.
That is something that you'll have to kind of figure out with each of your podcasts. I suspect you are going to have a hard time monetizing this podcast, right?
Yes.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
I think that you will have an easier time monetizing some of your other podcasts, and so you might decide at some point to paywall this one.
Yeah.
Right. But not paywall the other ones. It all depends. The business model follows the audience. I think too often we try to force a business model and that doesn't make sense. The business model follows the audience. So if you have a great audience that has a ton of budget, that can justify, that has making big capital investments, and advertising might work. If you have an audience that doesn't have a big capital investment, or there's just not a ton of advertising out there, then subscriptions might work. So it just depends.
Yeah, this podcast is my business school, or my
There you
in
go.
media, it's
There
my
you go.
education.
That's why I did my podcast, right?
Yeah,
It's a great way. It's people love to come on shows. It's ego bait. And so
totally.
like I get to talk to them and learn from them, and then they share it and everyone's happy.
Yeah,
Like,
and I've listened to a lot of your episodes. I highly recommend it. If you enjoy Media Empires, you also enjoy Media Operator, both on the podcast and the newsletter, of course. It's interesting. So that is what I'm doing. We've got 14 podcasts and different. By the time this releases, we'll probably have a few more, and in different positions in different sectors, and we've kind of like figured out how to do niche podcasting, and now we're wondering, hey, where do we go from here exactly? Do we have newsletters for every podcast, or every podcast that we think could is deserving of one, and sort of build that muscle, because we don't yet have that muscle? And we've kind of figured out a way to partner with podcast hosts in a way that scales and is not a bunch of cost up front. But we could use we can now hire people, so we could hire reporters, but it's a new muscle.
mm-hmm.
Do we, Craig Fuller would say, or he said the other day, go deep, stop going wide, pick an area, just and go super deep there. But it's kind of not my personality. And so I think we're going to go wide to some degree, wide within tech, within things that venture capitalists would invest in. And so I'm actually, when I was talking to Danny, I was talking to myself, which is maybe we build this podcast newsletter sort of company that monetizes in a couple of ways. One is via advertisers or maybe subscribers if we get there, but also via this paywalled product, or where the media that we do is a profitable way to get this data that we then sell for much more, almost like Tegas, where Tegas does it via the expert call, and maybe we do it just via reporters. For example, you said earlier, reporters, they talk to sources all day. Maybe we could figure out a way to scalably get the notes from those sources, where we kind of, I guess, transform how journalists think of themselves as not just writing this article, but also getting these transcripts that we could then sell on the back end. So one example could be, let's say we do a piece on or a content series on customer references. We look at all popular products and we interview the customers and see what they actually think about them. Some of that we release publicly, and some of that behind a paywall. So that's kind of a hypothesis I have, or something I'm curious about. But I'm curious, what any reactions to this, or what advice would you give for me?
The thing that like gave me a slight pause is turning the transcripts from like a report, like a source conversation, into a product. And the reason is you have to understand the incentive for the source. To some extent, the source has got a couple of motivations. One is revenge, right? They're pissed off and they're talking to you. Those tend to be on background or anonymous, right? Or their incentive is they want to make themselves look good, right? And so that case, they come out publicly and they will say things and all that. But in all cases, there's an incentive. Few of those incentives are just give you a bunch of information for the sake of selling that information. And so you've got to kind of figure out the incentive for why a source is talking to a reporter. And I think that if sources were talking to reporters and that content was just being like packaged and sold, you got to figure out the right way to do that. And I don't know off the top of my head how I would do that personally. But I think you could certainly do that model of like a Tegas type thing. And I saw I think you wrote a newsletter about like all the ideas you've got cooking. You must have a lot of time on your hands
Exactly.
to do all these ideas. I think actually what would be really interesting for you is an events business.
Interesting.
So I like events because they can be pretty high margin. Like there are trade shows that reach low 40% profit margins off like 10 million plus in revenue. So like they're just kicking off cash, and they are kind of cash flow friendly in that, like when I did my event, I had to put up 50% of the venue cost, but by the time I had to pay the caterer and the rest of the venue and the printing and all that, I had received all the sponsorship dollars. I had received many of the ticket sales. And so it became very cash friendly. And so you could theoretically build events tied to each of your shows, especially if they're personality driven. The personality could do that. Um, and the nice thing about events is events are, when they reach scale, can sell for a lot of money, right? I don't know what the multiples are on podcasts, but events, because there is a ticket and a sponsorship component, like at scale trade shows sell for like 10 to 12 times EBITDA.
Wow. Why do they
Yeah.
sell for such good multiples?
They're just like private equity just loves them because they kick off so much cash. Um,
Should they be a
and
separate company from the media company? Like to your point about earlier on uh,
um,
media for SaaS or something.
they don't have to be, because the buyer pool tends to be more tightly linked. Um, but what I have seen happen is like Informa made a decision to get out of the digital business for a while, right? And they decided to sell a ton of their publications off. I think they decided to do this in late 2019. And the reason is because the media margins were lower than the event margins. So they're like, why don't we just get rid of the digital stuff? That's a distraction. Like, let's really lean in on the event stuff. The problem was 4 months later, COVID hit. And suddenly, like, their event business was really struggling. So I think that the universe of prospective buyers for a media and events business is large enough that you don't have to split them. And, you do have the audience benefit of driving the audience to the event. But you could, right? You certainly could. I mean, one idea I've noodled on is partnering with creators to help them with their events and do it as a sort of joint venture where the creator and I both own this company. We scale this event and then we sell it one day. It's not an original idea. I think a friend of mine talked to about it, but like that's a cool opportunity. Um, Events are a great business. I think you should seriously look hard at events.
And do you think I should, like South by Southwest, where it's like a festival of these different sort of mini events all at once, or should I do like just what once a year a Turpentine CFO conference in the same way that you have a media operator conference around our CFO podcast, or how should I go about the execution of it?
Well, I bias to like focus, right? And so like a South by is could be great. I just don't know how to do a South by. Like the thought of trying to pull that off, or like what's the one that's in Lisbon? Like there's that, what is it?
Yeah, Web Summit.
Yeah, Web Summit. Like they do a massive one, right? You got CES, or you've got like all those. Like those, they're just so mass scale. I don't know how to pull it off. But you could imagine, like, could you build the ultimate CFO summit, right? Is there a trade show model, right? Because a lot of those things are trade shows where like there's a ton of sponsor like exhibition and all that. Mine wasn't that, but like, could you do that? I bias to more focus and topical focus.
And what's the formula for doing events well? Is it you get great speakers, give it to them, give them free access, and then charge $1,000 and get great people coming in? Or is it that simple, or kind of what's the
it depends, right? So for what my event was a learning and networking event. And so I did all 8 sessions, right? I moderated all day. And so what you were doing is you wanted to be in the room to hear from these executives. You also wanted to be in the room to meet the other executives that were there, right? Like these people are contemporaries. They want to meet each other and talk to each other. And look, a lot of them are there because they support me and they wanted to like show me that they care. Hopefully, a friend of mine told me I'm stupid for saying this. Like, I want you to come to my event because like you want to be at the event, not just because you like me. But my business P&L thanks you. So like that is one model, right? Is the single track content throughout the day, sufficient networking time, good food. Very important thing is to have good food, or at least forgettable food. It better not be bad. If it's bad, they will remember. And that's a great model. You have some sponsors come in, you have ticket sales come in. Now, the other way to do it is, and I think you and I were at a dinner together once with, I didn't get to talk to him, which I really regret. I think he's like the co-founder of like Money 2020.
Yes.
Now that model, I am unbelievable. He has got the best model for events because he basically picks a topic and he does the trade show model. The trade show model is great because those are scaled niche plays. Each of those businesses has to do 8 figures easily in revenue.
Describe the model for the audience might know.
Yeah. So what a trade show is like if you like in New York City, we have the Javits Center. And what this is you will walk the floor and see 300 exhibitors. Las Vegas is known for these, right? And this is where Money 2020 is held. This is where the health, I think it's just called Health, is held. This is where Shop Talk is. Those guys literally just pick a new industry and move into each of them. But you'll notice that each of them has like a technology angle to it, right? It's Money 2020 is fintech. Health is like health technology. Like they've always got that technology angle because they're playing in that disruption stage. Disruption matters. And so what a trade show is it's just like massive show floor with hundreds of exhibitors. Now, Money 2020 and those, they charge a lot for tickets. But for other trade shows, they don't charge as much from the ticket side because what they're trying to do is get as many people in the door to basically go look at all the exhibitors. And they'll have content, right? And they'll certainly do that because you gotta do something to draw the person in. But the end goal is to get as much focus on those exhibitors. Those businesses are hard to pull off, but if you can pull them off, that's where you get that sort of scale where you're selling for really high multiples. And that's the model. If you become the event, cash flow and the cash conversion cycle is just so unbelievable where you're literally, I know of one trade show where they used to walk around, the company that managed it, at the end of the event would walk around and go to each exhibitor and say, do you want this space next year? Here's the clipboard with the contract. Sign now. Otherwise, it goes on the market tomorrow and we're going to sell it to somebody else.
Oh my God.
And they renewed so many of their sponsors the same day of the event.
Wow. So it seems like a great business. You say it's hard. Is it hard because it's hard to build the network to become the number one spot and get people, or is it hard because it's really expensive, or what makes it hard?
I mean, it's expensive, right? Trade shows cost a lot of money. My event cost me close to $85,000, $90,000. And that was just a single track, single day summit conference where, it was in a theater and all that. I had 130 people. I have a friend, the one who actually helped me with the logistics of this event. He has done 50,000 person trade shows. He used to work in the commercial real estate space. And so he did for like 50,000 people. Just think about what that cost, right? The convention center, like just it's ungodly. It's an obscene amount of money that you have to put up. And so like, that's what makes it hard. And so like, you start small and then you grow and then you grow and but it's hard.
Yeah. Fascinating. Gearing towards closing here. I mean, another thing related to events, your most recent podcast, although it was a bit ago, was with Hampton, with Sam Parr about Hampton. And I've been curious about having, spent some time in the community space myself, if the future of communities is paid or if it's actually just going to be free, where people are just going to go to the CEOs in Hampton or other sort of niche communities and say, hey, join this Slack or group chat and it's free. And instead of they'll charge to get access to them, or they'll make some money via some other way as opposed to membership dues. I guess I'm curious in your thoughts of sort of the future of these kind of vertical communities.
I think that they will remain membership businesses. And ultimately it's because high price membership is a way of keeping people out. Ultimately, like, you want to keep people out. The CEO of the New York Times doesn't care about me. Maybe she does because I don't think she actually reads me. She should, but she doesn't, right? But she doesn't. There's nothing I can provide of value to her as the founder of a media operator, right? Like her lunch budget could be my revenue. We're just at different scales, and so paid communities are a way of gatekeeping, and so I don't see that going away. It's also the purest business model is just like you charge for someone to get in there. Now I don't think that's going to go away. And Hampton, they charge, I think, close to $9,000, right? And they do a lot of curation, right? The right people are in those small pods. It's a great business. I have a friend who runs a number of communities for like other media companies. He's charging like $3,500 a seat, right? And like these are media companies that you would know, but like it's a great business, right? And like you have to be interviewed and get in, and that sticker price it's a feature, it's not a bug, right? If someone's willing to spend $3,500, they're putting an investment into this,
Yeah.
That gives you the resources to do things. So no, I don't see that. I don't see membership businesses like that going away. I'm a big fan of those businesses. They're hard as hell to pull off, but I think that's a great play.
And so, yeah, there's an opportunity to almost like what Industry Dive did in publications, but that for membership communities.
Yeah, look, I've thought about it for AMO, right? I have a Slack channel right now, and like if you pay $200, you get my newsletter on Fridays, plus you get access to the Slack. But I have actually thought about making the community component its own thing, where like it's $1,000 or $2,000. And then what I do is I sort of aggregate, I pull people together based off of what their function is within a media company. So like I'm gonna, I go out and find the 10 CROs that have paid the $2,000, and you're now part of your pod, right? Now your CROs talking to each other about like compensation, or like I have this client who's just like I can't get him over, like or whatever CROs do, and you could do it for audience development. I could have my CEOs corner where it's just the CEOs, right? I could have it, depending on the size of the media companies, the corp dev teams. Like you can build these niche communities within the larger community. So yeah, I think that those are great businesses. You could, if you wanted to, you absolutely could try to be the Industry Dive of communities, where you start with one and then move to the next, move to the next. It becomes a playbook. Everything is a playbook.
I think there's a company called World 50 or something that does this with certain types of executives. So yeah, it's a compelling idea. Well, I've kept you here for almost 90 minutes, so I should let you go. But this has been a fascinating deep dive on lots of different elements of building a media company. Is there anything that we haven't covered that's particularly top of mind that you want to make sure to leave our readers with, besides the fact that they should subscribe and be a part of what you're building?
Yeah, I love that question. It's a question that I think every reporter should ask is, what is something I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? Because you get like all sorts of interesting tidbits. I mean, dude, I think that we really dug in, right? I think, so my girlfriend edits my newsletter, and
Great.
every time I say something, like she'll go, "What are you writing about? First party data?" Because I write about it all the time. I think this is a concept that more media companies and more of these creators and whoever's listening to you needs to really zero in on. You need to know who your audience is, and you need to be tracking what they're consuming at the individual level. Because if you have that data, and we'll go back to who my biggest advertiser is, but actually my two biggest advertisers, they both offer CDP products. If you have that data, you can build far better advertising businesses and subscription businesses, right? Because you can target your marketing to the right people with the right message. So if you do not have a first party data strategy, you're foolish. Like there's no way around it. You are foolish. This is why podcasts are harder, because it's harder to get that data. That's why I like newsletters, because once you have someone's email, it's easy to track what they do. But you needed strategy tied to first party data.
Yeah. And so just last question as it relates to that, would you recommend for us that we should build newsletters for these different podcasts as a way to try to get that first party data?
I don't know if I would say that, only because like it is surprisingly hard to change content formats and create new content formats.
Yeah.
Like the DNA of your business is audio. The DNA of your business is video, right? Like, and so to do that, it took us a long time to get that right at Morning Brew, right? Like it took us a long time. We were like, oh, wait a second, we know how to create great newsletters. We can create great podcasts. That was hard.
Yeah.
So no, I don't know if I would do that, other than like, it could be a sign up for the newsletter to get like the 5 links I'm paying attention to this week, or something, maybe. It becomes a distraction, I think. So I don't know if I would tell you to do that. I want to tell you to do that because you want the email address, but I just don't know if I believe it.
Yep, totally. Jacob, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. This has been very helpful.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on.